You are listening to the Will Power Podcast. Welcome to the show. I am Will Holdren, and I talk with some of the most influential CEOs, entrepreneurial leaders, and thought leaders to reveal the secrets that have led to their success. I believe that with the right knowledge and mindset, you can do anything you say your mind to. So if you want to learn how to change your life for the better, if you want to learn how millionaires actually became wealthy, or if you want to develop and start your own business from the ground up with the right knowledge to help you, then you are in the right place because this is the Willpower Podcast. How's it going, everyone? My name is Will Holdren. I'm the host of the Willpower Podcast. Today we have an incredible person who is also an amazing entrepreneur, and her name is Shirley Jump. And Shirley is actually the CEO of a company called JumpStart Creative Solutions. She has helped publish over 100 books, and she has also helped create over 39 national bestsellers, which is incredible. On top of that, she and her company have over 11 million books in print, which is quite the accomplishment. And I actually met Shirley down in Tampa, Florida at Tommy Whitehead's conference. Again, you guys remember Tommy had him on the podcast a couple of months ago. So first and foremost, Shirley, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. I was blown away with your story at the conference, everything you're doing with your company. It's really incredible, especially in the book space. I think it just needs to be recognized. So I appreciate you popping on,
Thank you.
letting people get
I
a
have
chance.
one skill in life, and I'm glad I get paid for it. So
Exactly. There's nothing better than getting paid doing what you love.
that's true. Yes.
So jumping right into it, the first question I want to ask you is a question I pretty much ask all of my guests, which is one, what makes you want to jump on podcasts like these or speak at conferences like Tommy's to really just share your story and let people know what you're doing?
So I started in nonfiction when I was 11 by lying about my age and getting a job at a newspaper. Yeah. Back in those days, because I'm a million years old, you didn't do anything like in person. Everything was dropped off at a drop-off box, and then the editor would pick it up and then print it. So they didn't know how old I was for several years. But then when I really wanted to write fiction and also do nonfiction books, I had no resource whatsoever to learn how to write a book. I mean, yeah, I had this useless degree in English because it doesn't teach you anything but how to analyze Joyce and Shakespeare and Dickens, which does not apply at all to today's world. So I didn't have a resource. There were some books, but there was no YouTube, there was no TikTok, there was none of that back then. And so I had a really long, hard learning curve on learning how to write a really compelling book. And so everything that I do is all about teaching people how to write better books. Because when you give me 4 hours of your life to read Tommy's book, I want to make sure it is worth that precious gift. And maybe it's just that I'm getting older, but to me, if you're spending those hours with a book I worked on instead of your spouse or your kids or your job or your dying grandma, then I better make it worth those hours. And so that's what we try to do with everything we create here.
Absolutely. And so why did you decide to go down this book path? I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they don't really think of this as a career to go into. But for you, what was that spark in you? Why did you want to go down this path and really start own your own company in the book world?
So when I started as a journalist, I really thought I wanted to be like Jane Pauley when I first went to college and everything. I wanted to go into TV, I wanted to be a news anchor. But then when I started actually doing stories, and I'd had to call like the family of a little old lady who got killed in a hit and run on her way home from bingo. And then I called the widow of my high school history teacher who had a heart attack at the wheel of the family car on vacation. And I
Gee,
felt like such a scummy person, like I didn't want the story that bad. And the day I quit working for newspapers was the day that another female reporter, and myself were trying to cover this same story. It was for the finance committee of a small town. First meeting for the new chairman. He was just getting his feet wet. And there was like literally a $1,500 discrepancy in the budget. She followed him into the bathroom to get the answer. And I looked at him and I said, I don't want it that bad. I'll get talk to you tomorrow. And I put in my resignation. So I started working for magazines, writing stories that were happy, that were informative. And then I realized that I wanted to take it to a bigger platform and I wanted to write books because I love to read so much. And so I started writing them. My very first book contract was a nonfiction biography because I'd interviewed somebody for a newspaper. And he said, she's the only one that got everything right. So she's the one I want to have write my book. And so that was my very first book contract way back in the 1990s.
Wow, that's fantastic. And at what point did you start your own company and really jump into that full time?
I think I was always full time because when you're a
Right.
writer, you can't just make money working for newspapers or magazines. I mean, you can, but it's a lot of work to make all the money in one resource
Yeah.
because anything in publishing or writing ebbs and flows. And so from the very beginning, I was always, writing for Chicken Soup for the Soul and writing for magazines and then working on that book and working on other books. I made it an official company, like LLC in 2003, but I have
Wow.
literally never done another job except substitute teaching for a couple years. This is what I've done my entire life.
Yeah.
So it's always been that. And Jumpstart, I made that as a DBA, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, because I wanted to clearly delineate the nonfiction from the rest of the company because it was becoming a lot more in demand. And I was like, man, I should kind of make this actually like a formal thing and hire people and everything. So now I have a cover designer, I have some editors, and I have like
Yeah.
people working for me. So
Yeah. You've definitely come a long way. That's amazing too. Starting back in 2003 and here you still are crushing it going forward with an
yeah,
amazing company. So that is really cool to see.
thank
Um,
you.
so why did you choose nonfiction in the beginning? Why didn't you go down the fiction route, or what was their reasoning behind that?
Well, I did go down the fiction route. So I've published, I don't know, I say 85 books, but I think I've published close to 90 or 92. I just kind of stopped counting after a certain number because it's hard to keep track of. But I've published more than 80 or 90 books, and most of those have been fiction for four of the big five publishers in New York. So I've worked for Berkeley and Hachette and HarperCollins and all of these big publishing companies and did a lot of fiction. And that's where I got most, not all, but most of my credentials, the New York Times, the USA Today, and some other bestseller and Who Just Wins. And there's not a lot of money in it because
Yeah.
publishing is such a competitive game. And so on Amazon, there's 20 million books. A million books are loaded every year. So if you're looking to make the money off the book, you're not going to do it. And so when I started working with my clients, I would tell them all the time, you can make the money on speaking. I make way more money speaking than I do on my books, even though I self-publish a lot of them because speaking is where the money's at. And I realized that there was an avenue for people to build themselves as experts so that they could go out and get those bigger speaking gigs by creating a book. And so that's what we did. We started creating these tools for people. And it really was just like a couple people that had asked me, can you do my book and stuff like that. And that's how it just sort of grew from there. Because I'm a ghostwriter, a lot of people don't talk about what I do because I've worked for some NFL players and people that are on the Today Show and so they won't tell anybody. So the referral game is kind of weird in my business because sometimes people are
Right.
like, yeah, you can work with her. But other people don't want anybody to know that they had a ghostwriter. So I can't talk about those people, but it's kind of cool to have worked for them.
Right. It's definitely confidential information, right? But obviously,
Yeah.
definitely helps them make the book seem a lot better. So
Right,
that's
right.
why you're definitely needed for those instances. But yeah, to your point, I think the book landscape has changed tremendously. I'm sure you've
Mhm,
definitely from starting back in 2003, and like you mentioned, Amazon came in, I think, obviously much later in 2003, and obviously
mhm.
had changed the whole entire landscape. I think a lot of
Yes.
people now they understand like you're not going to get rich, right? Writing a book anymore,
Mhm.
right? So
Right, you're right.
really about how you're going to make money. But from your perspective, I mean, why is it still so important for these entrepreneurs, these athletes to have their own book coming out just to have a book? You know what I mean?
Because like anybody, like you're a podcast host, there are a bazillion podcast hosts, right? But you're going to be the one with a book. The NFL players, for athletes especially, like it's a perception of being dumb, and most of the athletes I've met are not at all dumb. They're very smart, savvy business people. So
Yeah,
for them it's sort of an image thing, but for most people it differentiates them in a crowded marketplace. If you're a marketing person, they're a dime a dozen. There's one every time you turn around. But if you're the marketing person with a book, people remember that. And I'm all about, especially the older I get, making those passive income streams. So my books help me build courses and webinars and speaking and coaching. And all of that is a platform that I've built from creating a how-to book. And it was sort of a 5-year plan. And that's what I work with my clients. Like you need this not to make money on Amazon, because like I said, like you said, nobody does that. Very few people do. But
yeah,
in order to build these other streams for yourself, because are you going to want to be a massage therapist working with your hands forever? Are you going to want to be building roofs forever? Like you've got to find another avenue, and a book is an easy way to do that.
yeah, no doubt. And real quick, before we go on to the next topic, I just want to talk about something that I have personally been trying for the last couple of days and weeks. And this is something called Magic Mind. And what it is it really has been giving me a boost of energy and also has really helped me just become more focused and dialed in during the day. I was never a big fan of coffee. So I really wanted to give this a try. And I tell you what, I am just absolutely blown away by how focused and concentrated I feel after I take Magic Mind, this product. And I just feel fantastic during the day. And so if you guys are also in the same boat where you're not loving coffee, you want to feel more focused and not just have a shot of energy, a burst of energy, but you also want to get more focused on top of it, then I think you guys should definitely check out Magic Mind. I'm going to put the link in the bottom of the episode that if you can go to click on Magic Mind, go check it out. Go place your order with them. And also use the code MindGrowth20 and you can get a 20% discount on your order. So again, the code is MindGrowth20. I'll also include that in the notes of this show. But I tell you what, ever since I've been using it, I felt amazing. I feel more focused than I ever have. And also it gives you a boost of energy that you need to go out there during your day. Like you said, it just gives you more options, right? In the future, like that can potentially make money, which is so important, especially with today's economy. Things are always changing. So it's always important to have more ways.
Right.
So obviously you've seen how drastic the industry has changed in the past, 2 decades. Where do you personally see the industry going in the next couple of decades, going forward?
Well, AI is kind of terrifying to me because what it creates and what it writes is not at all what I would do. So I think that there's still going to be a really big demand for people like me that can take a message. AI is still too stilted and too weird, and sometimes you get strange results and it doesn't do what you want it to do. So I think there's still going to be a demand for that. And I think that AI is not going to, at least for a few years, going to be able to replicate a lot of the experience you get reading. I think it is only a matter of time before it does. But I think if you want that custom experience, then you've got to work with somebody. So I tell you, the ebooks, none of us saw the ebooks coming back when I first started. We all thought that was like a passing fad. And when I was trying to get published, because I had not sold my first book then, my agent at the time said, "You're so bad that if you really want to be published, maybe you should just self-publish it on Amazon." It was like the ugly stepchild of publishing. And now it has become a force to be reckoned with. And that is part of the problem. Like regular publishing didn't think ebooks would take off. They thought nobody would want to read a book on this machine. Like that's crazy. So they were very slow to change their marketing and to change their launch plans. And so all of us authors that worked for New York suffered financially. New York suffered financially. And then Amazon just took off and it became its own animal. And now it is the way for anybody to do it. And even though there's 20 million books on Amazon, it is still very rare for people to meet an author. I mean, you can probably count on one hand the number of authors you've met in your life. And it's when I go to a party and people are like, "You're an author? Like, what's that like? Where do you get your ideas?" Like, I'm a unicorn in the room because it's still not a very common thing. Maybe in 10 years, everybody will be one. I don't know if everybody wants to be, but it may be more common by then.
Yeah, I think a lot of it does have to do with status, right? There's a lot of power behind saying that, I am an author. I have a physical book. Here it is. I'm an expert in this industry. Look at me like as an expert, obviously.
Exactly. So. Yes. Yes. And for sure, you want it to look like that. A lot of people that self-publish, all their books are self-published, right? Like they're really slim and they pick the cheap paper. They did a really crappy cover. And you don't want that to be your calling card. Forbes said a couple of years ago that books are the new business cards because you can lead with them. And so if you do end up doing one, you want to go with a professional for everything because people only have like a split second to look at this book and decide, is this something I want to read? Especially in the TikTok world, right? You got like, okay, yeah, I'll pick it up. And then they've decided or they're going to put it away. So I think it's even more imperative for people to hire professionals rather than just going to your Uncle Joe's basement and using his computer and putting something up on Amazon, because that's not going to get you where you want to go. It'll actually work negatively against you.
Right. You want to be proud of the product that you put out at the end of the day. No,
yes.
No.
Yes.
So like we were talking about, I think publishing a book is a huge step in the process of being an expert in your industry. But also when you can turn that into a national bestseller, I mean, that just holds that adds a whole nother level of credibility behind you. And you guys have done over 39 plus national bestsellers. So
yes,
I'm curious from your guys' perspective, what constitutes a book becoming a bestseller in your perspective? Like what has to go into it? What
if we knew, we'd do it every time.
Yeah, right.
I remember the first time I hit a bestseller list and my editor called me and I was like paralyzed with fear for days because I thought, what made this book hit a bestseller list? Because it was no different to me than any of the others. I mean,
Really?
you have to start with a compelling book that people are going to talk about. But bestseller lists are just such a shoot. You just never know which book will take off and which one won't. Now, there's certain ways to make sure it does. Like the New York Times list is basically a distribution part. You have to get it in the hands of the right booksellers because the New York Times list is handpicked.
Yeah.
And USA Today is all based on sales. Wall Street Journal was all based on sales. Amazon is based on sales. So then those are kind of more realistic bestseller lists. You have to have a good product, but other than that, I can't tell you what the key ingredients are because nobody knows. And it's just like lightning in a bottle. Some people capture it, some people don't, you know.
Interesting. Interesting. So there's
Mhm.
no real secret thing. Do this, do this, do this, and it's like going to be automatically a bestseller. It
Right.
just,
The Amazon list, you can manipulate your bestseller thing by choosing the right categories because Amazon's all about the algorithm, right? And if you put your book in the right categories where there's not a lot of competition, you can absolutely be a number one Amazon bestseller. To the general public, they're like, oh, you're a number one Amazon bestseller. They don't understand that you put it into a category that didn't have a lot of competition, and that's how you got to number one. So it's still a status symbol, but the other ones are all kind of sales, like big sales. You know, when I was on USA Today, we were selling tens of thousands of copies. In the New
wow.
York Times list, we sold hundreds of thousands of copies. So that's a volume thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. And so with you guys' current company, do you guys help with the distribution as well after someone edits a book and gets it out? Are you guys working with them on the marketing side of things and also the distribution side of things for their book?
We'll upload it to Amazon for you, but I don't do the marketing. I worked in marketing for like a hot second and would rather chew off my own arm than ever go back to working in marketing. I hate it so much. But when
Yeah.
somebody signs with us, we give them like here's a timeline. You should be doing this when you get your cover. You should be doing that. And then if you can, can find somebody that helps you with it, that's great. The reality is whether you sell a book to Random House or you self-publish it, you're on your own for marketing. You really absolutely have to do the grunt work. When I get a book, like I just had a book come out 6 months ago, and I'm a New York Times bestselling author. My editor sent me 2 memes and a podcast interview, and they were like, "Good luck, and it's in Costco, so make sure you sell a lot of copies." Like, what am I supposed to
Wow.
do with 2 memes and a podcast interview?
Right.
I'm not going to reach 8 million people with that,
Right.
So the marketing is still on my shoulders. Now they'll do it for James Patterson or Stephen King, but neither one of us are that. So they're not going to do it for me. So you've got to go into it with some kind of a plan. And I want people to start talking about their book from the minute they have the cover, because the cover makes it real. The cover makes it look like something that people can actually buy. And I'll tell them what to do, but I won't do it for
Yeah.
them.
And a lot of that revolves around speaking engagements, right? I think you mentioned
Mhm.
that for the best way to
Yes.
publicize yourself. So do you help them get speaking engagements, or what's the best way for these people after they become authors to actually get these speaking engagements lined up?
You definitely want to start. I don't help them book them because I have my own that I'm doing. I really stay in my lane of what I
Yeah.
do well.
Gotcha.
Um, but I do work with a couple of speaking bureau companies, and you really want to start building that list and those contacts. Like anything else, it's networking. It's who you know. If you're big in the podcast space, then obviously you're going to want to build up some connections when you go to Podfest or any of these other kinds of places. Like yours is all about achievement, so you want to look for what kind of groups would be about achievement and success and all of that. And
Mhm.
so keep that list going as you're going. And people don't generally hire speakers unless they have a speaker reel or they know them. So if you do speak, record yourself. I always forget to do that. So my speaker reel is really old. Um,
Yeah.
but I need to tell somebody, record me next time I speak. But then you build up a reputation and people can trust that you will do a good job. We will write speeches for people because I was a national speech competitor and I paid for most of my college that way.
Wow.
So I'll write them for people if they want me to, but we don't book it.
That's awesome. Well, did anyone record you speak at Tommy Whitehead's conference?
I
Or no?
don't think so.
Oh man.
I don't think so. That's okay. I'm speaking again in October a couple of times, so I'll make sure I get something there.
Yeah.
So,
Gotcha. There you go. Well, that's awesome. So another thing I want to talk about is obviously you're really focused as being a ghostwriter. Your whole company's kind of built around is really helping people convey what's in their minds onto paper and making it come out amazing, right? And sound
mhm.
off, make people really want to read it. But for you, from the ghostwriter perspective, what's like the most challenging part when you're working with these athletes and top entrepreneurs and really conveying what they want to say into a book format?
It's getting them to be emotional. I worked with a woman on a sort of self-help book, and she had been through a lot of traumatic events. She never really shared how that felt, no matter how hard I kind of dug at it, she just didn't. And I'm not there to be her therapist, so I'm only going to dig so far. And ultimately it's her book and her decision what to share. But that getting that connection for the reader is really difficult to draw out of some people. And other people, I think they don't really, even though we do an outline and we do a plan and we start working on the book, once we start working on it, sometimes they're like, oh, I kind of want it to go in this direction versus that direction. Now
Mm,
we're prepared for that because I'd say like 50% of our books, around maybe 40%, around the chapter 3 mark, they figured me out, I figured them out, and we kind of refine the book's direction every once in a while. I don't know, maybe a handful of books we've had to kind of like completely go into a new direction because the client changed their plans, or they looked at it and said, you know what, I don't think I want to tell this story, I want to tell that story. So we try to, when I sit down with the client, I'm not just a publisher who's like, okay, so how are we going to get it out and when are we going to release it? I want to know, how are you going to make money off of it, and
yeah.
how are we going to position you in that lane? So a lot of people will come to me after talking to other publishers and they're like, well, they just wanted the down payment and then a release date. And I was like, no, 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 we want you to be successful with the other avenues. And we're never going to lie to you and say, oh, yeah, you have all the money back on Amazon in 3 months, because that is a lie. And anyone who tells you that is lying to you. Anyone who says, I can get you on the New York Times list is lying to you, because of, I know how the New York Times list works. So you got to really look for the con artists in this industry, because there are plenty of them.
Yeah. No, and to your point, I think it's so crucial to have that vulnerability side come out into
Mhm.
the book, like you mentioned, so you can really connect with the readers. And I really could understand why people struggle with that, because once you publish that out in the book, I mean, it's out there forever. And so everyone can really judge you and look in
Right.
on you and see, who you really are as a person. So I think a lot of people would struggle overcoming that. But from your guys'
Mhm.
perspective, I mean, how do you help them overcome that fear of judgment, being vulnerable in the book setting?
So I tell clients a lot of times that some of what I've gone through in my life, and I've had some trauma, I've had some difficult times, and I'll share that with them. And I tell them that it's kind of like a drip campaign. If you see other people that are in this same situation, you sharing this may be the words that they need to hear right now. And then somebody else will say something, somebody else will say something, and then they'll make that choice that they need to get help or get where they need to go. So if you don't share it, then you can't change a life. You can't help somebody else escape what you're doing, or what you did. So it's really important for them to do it. Do they all? No, they really don't, because it is really hard. And I have a YouTube channel and I get plenty of comments about from people that are just like mean. Like somebody told me my dog was ugly the other day. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? And when you share yourself, people, because of the anonymity of social media, feel like they can say, your dog is ugly.
Yeah.
So
There's a lot of professional haters out there. I'm not sure
there
how they have so much time
are.
to like to comment something like that like all day, but
Right, right. And it's my dog, and she's not ugly at
yeah,
all.
it's not related whatsoever to anything inside the book, but they just want to
Right,
make themselves heard.
right,
So that's all it
right.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, people.
Yeah. So another thing that I think is interesting is that so many books out there I think have different formats, different lengths,
Mhm,
different word count. But obviously with you, you know what the best, right? The best word count should
mhm.
to optimize sales going forward, the best, length the book should have pages wise. So I'm just curious, just so I can get like a good answer on that. What in your
Right.
opinion is a good word count for a book to have in nonfiction space, a good page count? Because I've seen some that are 400
Right.
that I don't
Oh,
want to
yeah.
page 200 if I've seen too
Well,
short.
you've got to think about your end user, right? Like how we target a book to baby boomers is a little different than how we target it to millennials. Now, frankly, everybody should be targeting to millennials because the baby boomers are dying off and the millennials are going to be the biggest generation. So you really want to target it towards people that buy it. People don't have the attention spans that they had before. Where I used to write when I first started in my career was 70, 90,000 words. Now they're like, can you give us 50? Because after 50,000 words, it becomes a pretty unwieldy book and it becomes expensive. So
Hmm.
people have this like mental block at $20 in their heads. And when you do, what we do is 40,000 words. So it looks like a real book. It has heft and weight. It's like a half an inch thick. So it feels like a real book, but they sell it for 17 or 20 or whatever, something under $20. And then you're printing it for $4 a book. So when you go to an event and you're like, buy my book for $15, that's $11 per book that you are making, for yourself. So a lot of thought went into what's the best length for that. And I just find that people just don't go past the 40,000 word mark in a nonfiction unless it's really, really good. Now, when you're writing for Random House, they're printing books for $1 a piece. You're not Random House, so you can't afford to do them. You don't have the volume to print them at $1 a piece. So they
Yeah.
can afford to go longer. But for the average person, we like about 40,000 words because it just feels and looks like a real book.
Yeah, that's interesting. So 40,000. So what does the page length look like on 40,000? Would you say what that was?
Depends on a lot of factors, like how big the font is. So this one's 179 pages, and this one, because I have a lot of call outs, I think this is 218. So like it depends on what you do on the inside. Like if you had a lot of call outs, or like Tony was smart, he put some QR codes and stuff in there. Whereas this one has a bunch of exercises and stuff in it. So it's a little bit longer. Same word count. We're the same exact word count.
Okay, gotcha.
You can choose a different cover size. There's a lot of little factors that go into it.
Yeah. And so you said under $20 is also like the optimal price point. If you go over $20, it kind of deters people, and too low, it also
Yeah.
deters people. Is that what you've seen?
Yeah, because they're going to think, I don't know this person, and am I going to spend $20 on them? And it seems like $20 has been the price point for a really long time, despite the economy. It's just kind of like a mental thing. I don't know him. I don't think I'm going to spend $21. And when you have a book of 80,000 words, it has to sell at $21 for Amazon to make money and you to make money. So they'll force you to price it at if your book is too big. So you don't really have a choice then. By keeping it to a size that is reasonable, you can make some good money off of it.
Yeah. No, I mean that definitely makes sense. So if I'm someone that wants to make that leap, for instance, and want to find a ghostwriter to help me publish out my book, what are some of the main things I should be looking for when I'm talking to ghostwriters or talking to these publishing companies that are out there? Like, what are the main things I should be looking for?
Definitely look at the work that they have. So when you want to look at before and after, especially with anybody that's offering editing, because I know a lot of people that are editors that do nothing but kind of clean up the grammar. And you really want to see, did they shape this into something compelling? You want to look at the contract with any kind of a publishing house to see if they're taking the copyright. The average person does not understand copyright law. And a lot of these publishing companies bet on that. And when they take the copyright, they have the legal right to sell it and make money on it. And you have to wait until they give it back to you to do the same. So you don't want them to do that because you want to retain your copyright. It's your book. With our contracts, you retain your copyright unless I co-author it with you, and then we just split the profits. We have a contract for that.
Yeah.
And you want to look at the work that the ghostwriter has done to see how the books sound. A good ghostwriter should sound different with every single book because my goal is to sound like the client, not like myself. So if I send you 5 excerpts of our work, I guarantee you will not be able to tell which words are mine and which words are the client's. Absolutely guarantee it, because my goal is to always sound like them. And our books don't sound the same. None of them sound the same.
That's impressive. Is it difficult to kind of mimic the author's voice? I feel like that'd be hard for every book that you write.
It's actually really fun, I guess. I really like it because, I had a fiction background, so I don't think it's that hard of a leap for me to be able to do it. But no, it's actually really fun because some books are like super religious, some books are super in your face, and some books are in the middle. And so every day is a little bit different. And we have 3 editors here underneath me, and then a cover designer and a formatter, copy editor, and a proofreader. So we have a whole team of people
That's
that will
awesome.
look at it and make sure that everything is right. There's no mistakes. Not that something doesn't get through every once in a while. It happens in my traditionally published books too. Every once in a while, you're like, man, and there's that one reader that says, you said his eyes were blue on page 56 and then green on page 79. And it's
Yeah.
like, thanks for letting me know about something that's in print forever.
Right.
But when you self-publish, you can change it at any point, which is also a plus because you can decide, all right, now I'm going to offer this course, so I'm going to change this book and put these call outs in it instead. So there's a lot more freedom that way.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I think another limiting belief that people have is kind of the duration it takes to write a book. I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people thinks that's going to be like, a year and a half, maybe even 2 years just to finally get the finished product. Or I don't know, I've heard one person said like a month even, right? So that's obviously not right. And it wasn't a really good book. But from your guys'
Yes.
process, I mean, how long does your guys' process normally take, if someone wants to jump in with you guys and get a book published?
So the average client is 12 months, 12 to 14 months, because they're very busy entrepreneurs, right? And they don't have the time to meet with us all the time. Now, Tommy's book we did in 6 or 7 months, and we met every week. Most of my clients I meet with every 3 weeks, and then I give them a chapter. So it's kind of a quid pro quo sort of thing where I'm giving them the chapter, and I've broken up the year into that. We have 2 months for production no matter what. So whatever the schedule says, I got to take 2 months off the end for production and be done with the book in 10 months or 12 months. But that's worked pretty well for almost everybody. We've done a book as quickly as 3 months. I don't think I want to do that again. 6 months, we can definitely handle. 9 months, 12 months, anything like that. A lot of people, when they go to write their own book, it takes years. I just talked to somebody yesterday that's been working on the same book for 5 years because you look at that blank page and you don't know where to start. And the good thing about working with somebody like me is that we do a call like I'm doing with you when they talk, and I write the chapter from what they say. Because most of us can write with our mouths, like we can tell a great story about meeting this person or, the lesson that we learned from this. But when you have to sit down in front of the computer and actually write it out, it comes out really stiff if you even get it on the page at all. And so working with us, it sounds like you, it feels like you, and it's a much more natural sort of book than what would they be creating on their own. And sometimes taking years to do because it's a tough prospect. It really is.
Right. A lot of people just get that writer's funk where they're just stuck, like you mentioned. Like they have the idea,
Right.
but they cannot turn it into words and not relate in a way where like it kind of engages the reader and tells a story in such a way that the
Right.
reader just keeps on reading. So
Right. And most first time writers do a terrible job of it, not because they're terrible, it's because they don't understand book structure. All books have a structure to them.
yeah.
And we kind of innately know it, but we don't when we have to sit down and do it. That's another story. I teach fiction, how to write fiction on my YouTube channel, which is Write Better Fiction with Shirley Jump. And there I talk a lot about how to structure a book. But the cool thing about nonfiction is it's structured the same way, just with a topic, a true topic as opposed to a fictional topic.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. And before we run out of time, I just got a couple more questions to ask you. So one,
Mhm.
obviously you've been doing this for a while. Your company is super successful. I mean, you have people on your team. You guys have done so many bestsellers and just so many books overall. What's your motivation to continue doing this at this high level?
Because I want to have somebody have an impact on another person's life. Because the books that I read constantly. They have an impact on me, and I really want to create those things. I have loved this job since I was a little girl, and I can't imagine doing anything else. And plus, at my age, I'm not going to learn a new skill. So I'm really pleased to be able to do it. And every client is different, every story is different, and bringing it to life and then handing this book over to the client and saying, "Here you go, here's your story," is just an amazing moment every single time.
Yeah, it's got to feel good. And looking
Mhm.
ahead, I mean, what are some of the major goals that you have for, just your company moving forward, if you have
So
any?
we're going to start a mastermind program for the nonfiction in the fall because not everybody can afford me. And plus, even with the people that we have, we can only take on so many clients a year because I see every single thing that goes through the company. I want to make sure everything has that same level of quality, whether I'm working on it or not.
Right.
So we're going to start a mastermind program for a lot of people that want to do their own book. That should be starting in September or October. And at the same time, I'm growing the fiction side. I've got a mastermind program going over there. I've got a community because most of my speaking comes from fiction education.
Mhm.
So we're doing a lot of classes and things like that on there. And then I have the free YouTube channel.
Okay.
So growing all of those things, again, doing what I tell my clients to do, growing my passive income streams through
Yeah.
other products.
Growing your network, growing relationships, and growing
Mhm.
passive income. That's what it boils down to.
Exactly. Yep.
So, before we hop off, is there anything else that you'd like to say? And if people want to reach out to you or your company, where's the best spot for them to find you?
They can find me pretty much anywhere. If you Google Shirley Jump, you'll get like 11 million hits. My brother used to do it at work just to show his friends, look how many hits my sister gets, because I've been around for a million years. But they can just find me pretty much anywhere by just Googling me. But it's JumpStart Creative Solutions is the website. And I'm always happy to talk to people about their books. They don't have to sign a contract with me. If they're just wondering, should I do traditional? Should I do this? I'm happy to help them and answer their questions because it's such a daunting process. And my goal is to make it easier and make everybody have a better book than they would have had before.
Yeah, I love that. It's such a great mission at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Guys, there you have it. Shirley Jump, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Willpower Podcast. If that's the case, help us spread the message of positivity and simply wanting a better life by giving us a 5-star review. Until next time, have a great week.